For nearly a decade, Angelina Jolie barely said anything publicly. While tabloids ran wild, lawyers battled, and the public demanded her side of the story, she remained measured and restrained. Then, in the summer of 2026, she finally spoke. The most heartbreaking thing she said about Brad Pitt was not an accusation or an angry outburst. It was 4 quiet words about how her own spirit had been broken. And the most powerful revelation did not come from her at all, but from the 6 children who have gradually and quietly removed his name from their own lives. The key turning point was her admission that she had been taken down a little bit, a line that reflected years of emotional damage rather than a direct attack. The growing distance between Brad Pitt and several of the children became the strongest public signal of how deeply the family had fractured. Jolie framed her recovery as something driven by her children, who encouraged her to reclaim the parts of herself she had set aside during the hardest years. Throughout the entire saga, she relied on restraint, allowing court filings, legal battles, and the children's choices to speak louder than any explosive interview ever could. To understand why her recent comments caused such a stir, you have to remember how rarely she speaks about the divorce. Since filing in September 2016, Jolie has largely avoided discussing Brad Pitt directly. She has talked about her films, humanitarian work, and children, but she has almost never publicly attacked him. That silence made every rare comment carry enormous weight. When she told Variety that her fighting spirit had finally returned, she also admitted that she had lost it for a time and had been taken down a little bit. Without naming anyone, she acknowledged that the years surrounding the divorce had broken something inside her. What made the statement so powerful was what she did not say. Jolie did not accuse Brad Pitt directly. Instead, she described the damage she had experienced. For someone known for strength and control, admitting that she had lost the fight that once defined her revealed far more than a dramatic public confrontation ever could. The story traces back to the private flight in 2016 that ultimately ended the marriage. According to court filings, Jolie later alleged that Pitt behaved abusively toward her and some of the children during the flight. Pitt was investigated by the FBI and the Los Angeles Department of Children and Family Services, but no charges were filed, and he has consistently denied the allegations. What remains undisputed is that the incident became the breaking point that led to divorce and nearly a decade of legal conflict. While Jolie stayed publicly disciplined, the children began making their own statements. Shiloh legally petitioned to drop Pitt from her surname in 2024. Zahara began using Jolie publicly, including at her college graduation. Vivian appeared professionally as Vivian Jolie in the Broadway production of The Outsiders. Maddox later filed his own legal petition to remove Pitt from his name. Pax had previously expressed harsh criticism of his father in a resurfaced social media post. By 2026, 4 of the 6 children had formally or publicly distanced themselves from their father's surname, and a 5th had openly voiced anger toward him. The script argues that this became the strongest public indication of where the children stood. The winery battle. Another major conflict involved Chateau Miraval. Jolie sold her stake in the winery in 2021, leading Pitt to sue, claiming she had violated an agreement not to sell without his consent. Jolie countersued, arguing that Pitt had been engaged in a campaign to control and punish her since the divorce. The legal battle over the winery became a second front in the war between them, with each court ruling interpreted as part of a larger struggle that had been ongoing for years. The career she says she lost. One of Jolie's most surprising revelations was that she had intended to step away from acting before the divorce. She had been focusing on directing and humanitarian work, but after the separation, she needed to stay close to home and earn enough to support the family. As a result, she returned to acting under tightly controlled conditions, choosing projects that allowed her to remain near her children. According to her account, the divorce did not simply affect her emotionally, it redirected the entire course of her career. The children brought her back. Jolie said her children, now mostly adults, have been encouraging her to travel, work, and reconnect with parts of herself that she had set aside during the difficult years. She then made the remark that became one of the most discussed lines of the interview, "They still like me," which says a lot. In the context of a family where several children have distanced themselves from their father's name, the implication was impossible to miss. The script presents this as a subtle but unmistakable indication that the children have largely rallied around their mother. What Jolie actually exposed? The final argument is that Jolie did not expose Brad Pitt through a dramatic confession. She did not hold a press conference, release a tell-all book, or make new explosive allegations in 2026. Instead, she exposed him through a pattern. Years of silence, admissions about her own broken spirit, the career she says she sacrificed, the ongoing winery lawsuit, and above all, the choices made by their children. The script also acknowledges that Pitt has consistently denied the abuse allegations, that no charges resulted from the investigations, and that he has spoken publicly about his struggles with alcohol, therapy, and sobriety. It argues that the situation is more complicated than a simple villain versus victim narrative. In the end, the rewritten script concludes that the most damaging exposure was not anything Angelina Jolie said. It was the sight of several of their children quietly removing Brad Pitt's name from their own identities, one by one, over the course of nearly a decade. Her silence allowed the facts, the legal battles, and the children's decisions to tell the story on their own. The central message is that Jolie's power came not from public attacks, but from restraint and from the visible reality of where the children ultimately chose to stand.